Hello everyone, this is Dr. Carolyn Maria, working as an assistant professor in Loyola College of Education, Chennai. The title of the course is Educational Psychology, in which we are going to deal with Unit 3, Motivation and Learning. This is part 2 video lecture, which is going to deal with learning, the theories of learning with regard to Jean Piaget, then Behaviorist Theory, Pavlov's Classical Conditioning Theory, Skinner's Operant Conditioning Theory, Thorndike's Connectionism, and Constructivist Theory by John Dewey. I have created a separate video lecture for exclusively Jean Piaget's cognitive development theory. I'll give the link in the description box. Kindly access to the link and learn Jean Piaget's cognitive theory. So this video lecture will be dealing with behaviorist theory, connectionism, classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and John Dewey's constructivist theory. Before going into learning theories, first we learn what is learning. Learning is behavior modification. It is a relatively permanent change in the behavior which occurs as a result of activity, training, practice, and experience. Psychological point of view, learning implies making the most appropriate response to the stimulus. Learning is continuous. It starts from womb and ends in tomb. Learning, according to modern psychologists, it is a reinforced practice. When we keep giving motivation only, the learning is strengthened and it will create a permanent change in the behavior. There are so many psychologists who have defined the learning as Gates and others define learning is a modification of behavior through experience and training. G.D. Boss said, learning is the process by which the individual acquires various habits, knowledge, attitudes that are necessary to meet the demands of life in general. Gardner Murphy said, the term learning covers every modification of behavior to meet the environmental requirements. The amount of learning proficiency achieved divided by time taken to achieve the learning amount is equivalent to the rate of learning. So whatever you want to learn, how much ever time you are investing in that, accordingly you will achieve the proficiency of whatever you are learning. Let's now focus on the transfer of learning. Learning is transferred in three ways to us. One is positive transfer. So the previous learning will help a person to go for further learning is positive transfer. For an example, if you learn to ride a bicycle, it will help you to ride a two-wheeler. Then further it will help you to go for a four-wheeler. Negative transfer is the previous learning hinders the next learning. For an example, Tamil typewriting, if you have learned, when you go for English typewriting, the fingering is different. So that will hinder you to go for further learning. Same way, mother tongue will serve as a hindrance for learning any foreign language. And there is a transfer called zero transfer. No interference with regard to the previous learning and the next learning. If you are good at karate, no matter that it is not a guarantee that you can be a very good cook. So there is no connectivity between cooking and karate. Let's focus on the behaviorist theory. All behaviors are acquired through conditioning. It is the idea of the behaviorist people. The process of training or accustoming a person or an animal to behave in a certain way or to accept any circumstances. Conditioning occurs through interaction with the environment, and the behaviorists believe that our responses to environmental stimuli shape our actions. The school of behaviorism emerged in 1910s led by John B. Watson. The main goal of behaviorism is to be able to predict and control the behavior. Let's see what John W. Watson has said. The major thinkers of behaviorism are Ivan Pavlov, Edward Thorndike, John B. Watson, B. F. Skinner. But John B. Watson is called as the father of behaviorism because he has told that give me a dozen of healthy babies, I can make any one of them as a theologian or a criminal as you want, no matter whatsoever is his or her heredity. So he said that whatever maybe the heredity, that is whoever may be the parent. If you give the child healthy baby, with the environment, I can condition the mind of the child. I can make them as a criminal or a terrorist or a theologian or a teacher or a doctor according to my wish. That is what he claimed. In order to prove this, he has gone for an experiment. What he has done is he has taken a baby Albert in the year 1920s, and he classically conditioned the human baby to experience the fear at the sight of the white rat. And as a result of the stimulus generalization, at the sight of other small furry animals, the baby became very afraid of. He has taken a baby Albert, and he has exposed the white rat in front of the baby. Whenever the baby tries to touch the white rat, he created a very loud noise with the help of a hammer. So this created a sort of annoying and irritating sense in the child, and the child became very afraid. So when the child grew into an adult, the child was having that kind of fear. So he said that any person could be the condition, the brain of any person could be conditioned, and artificially we can create a sort of fear or learning in a person. He achieved this by creating a loud, painful voice whenever Albert touched the rat. Albert began to associate the small animals with the noise. You could see in this picture, before conditioning, when the child was exposed to white rat, the child was just smiling. After conditioning, that is after hearing the bang noise, whenever the child come across with a white rat, the child started to cry. After the child became a big person also, the child was afraid of even the fur toys and fur dolls. So by which he has conditioned the brain of a person. Then now we'll go on with the theory of connectionism by E.L. Thorndike. E.L. Thorndike was an American psychologist. He has written about this theory in his book called Animal Intelligence. This theory is even otherwise called as association learning theory, trial and error theory, theory of connectionism. Learning is the formation of strengthening the bond of connection between stimulus and response. That is the idea of E.L. Thorndike. And he also said that by trial and error, correct responses are strengthened and wrong responses are eliminated. This theory was later modified by the most famous student of him, B.F. Skinner. Let me explain to you the theory. He has taken a hungry cat and he kept the hungry cat in a puzzle box, and he kept meat outside. And in order to get the meat, the hungry cat was going for so many trials by leaving the legs out and jumping and bending the bar. Such a lot of activities the cat was doing. At one point of time, the cat by mistake pressed the lever and the latch was open. The cat was able to come out and eat the meat. So this is the experiment he has done. And in this experiment, cat has learnt the skill of opening the door and not the skill of eating the meat, because right from the birth, cat knew how to eat meat. Because the cat was hungry, it has gone for so many trials, and all the wrong trials were eliminated over a period of time by repeating the same activity again and again, and the cat was sticking on to the correct trial. After some time, when the cat was again and again repeatedly kept in the puzzle box, whenever the cat was hungry and the meat was kept outside, at one point of time, the cat learned the skill of opening the latch and opening the door and coming out and eating the meat. So the wrong trials were eliminated, and the cat was sticking on to the right trial of learning the skill of opening the latch. So cat has learned the skill of opening the door. What are the educational implications of this Thorndike's theory of connectionism? He has proposed three laws of learning: law of readiness, law of exercise, and law of effect. Law of readiness is a bond created between stimulus and response. The stimulus is actually, the cat was having two kind of stimulus. One is internal stimulus, another one is external stimulus. Internal stimulus is the hunger, external stimulus is the tempting meat outside. The response for the stimulus is cat was trying for so many activities of bending the bar, stretching the leg out, jumping, and all these were the different responses the cat has undergone. So the stimulus response bond was ready for establishment. Because the cat was hungry, cat has gone for so many trials. Imagine if a tummy filled, a well-eaten cat, if it is kept in a puzzle box, automatically you cannot expect the cat to go for these kind of trials. Cat would have just slept. So, mental readiness is essential in order to learn anything. That is what the idea of Thorndike. So, Thorndike said that in order to learn anything, first of all, our mind should be ready enough. So, the educational implication is mental and physical readiness needed for learning. A teacher should consider the student's mental readiness for learning. If you want to teach any new theory, don't wait for the last period to teach. Rather, go for the first period and teach them so that the students will be ready enough to learn. And especially if you want to teach anything new, soon after lunch break, if you are teaching, the students will not be ready enough to receive whatever you are teaching. So, law of exercise. After learning the skill of opening the latch, Thorndike did not leave the cat once. Thorndike repeatedly made the hungry cat to be in the puzzle box whenever the cat felt hungry and the meat was kept outside. So again and again the cat was trained to go for so many trials and eliminating the wrong trials and going for the right trial. So this is what is called as exercise. So the stimulus response bond was strengthened because of the repetition as well as vice versa. Vice versa, if you are not allowing the hungry cat, again and again repeatedly, if you are not allowing the cat to go for the puzzle box, cat wouldn't have learned the skill of opening the latch. Educational implication, after we teach, the students are expected to go home and learn. In order to go home and learn, we give them the homework. So adequate drill is given and continuous feedback could be given by which the students can keep learning. Then law of effect. The stimulus response bond is strengthened because the cat was provided with the meat. So cat had the meat and it felt very happy, and that like same way if the cat is again and again kept in the puzzle box but the meat is not kept outside, automatically cat wouldn't have tried to come out of the box. So educational implication, when you want to learn the effectiveness of your teaching, we need to go for an assessment. So suitable praise and blame will make the student to achieve or otherwise fail. If you praise and motivate the students and if you give them the proper feedback, the students will keep learning again and again. Rather, if you just scold the students and if you snub the students or criticize the students, they feel very unhappy. Let's now focus on the theory of classical conditioning. Ivan Pavlov was the one who proposed the theory of classical conditioning. He was a Russian physiologist, that is, he was a doctor, and he has done this experiment with the help of a dog, and the name of the dog is Pavlov's dog. This is the first theory to give the scientific evidences for the process of learning. He said that a type of learning in which a natural stimulus becomes a condition by associated with an unconditional stimulus. As we proceed the theory, you will understand better. The key terms of this theory which we need to focus on are unconditional stimulus, UCS is the food, unconditional response, UR is saliva, neutral stimulus, bell, conditional stimulus, bell, and conditional response, CR, saliva to bell. Let me explain the story for you. Like Thorndike, Pavlov also has taken an animal, dog, which was very hungry. So for a hungry dog, he has taken the food, very favorite, food like sort of biryani he has taken and given to dog. The moment the dog sees the food, the dog started to salivate. It is natural, no harm in that. Then afterwards, what happened? Again and again, whenever the dog was hungry, Pavlov has given the dog a food Along with the food, he has given a bell. So first time when the dog was listening to the bell, no any you can see in this picture there was no response in dog. But when food and bell are together given again and again, repeatedly when it was given, at one point of time, for the sound of the bell, the dog was able to salivate. So he's trying to prove that the mind of the dog can be conditioned. So for a bell sound, salivation is happening for the dog, which is it is not natural. It is quite unusual. So he said that we can condition the mind of any person by artificially. So preconditioning phase for food, the dog was salivating, that is UCS to UCR. That is natural. During this time, during preconditioned phase, when the bell was shown to the dog, there was no response. So bell was a conditional stimulus. But when this conditional stimulus was associated with unconditional stimulus as the food, the dog was salivating during the conditional phase. Post conditional phase, what happened? For the stroke of the bell itself, the dog was salivating. So this Pavlov didn't stop this experiment only with the bell. He has even introduced light, fork, for everything. Dog was salivating the same because the conditional stimulus was associated with the food, which was the unconditional stimulus. You could see in this picture, before conditioning, unconditional stimulus, the dog was salivating. For a whistle, neutral stimulus, no response from the dog. And during conditioning, once again, the dog was salivating. So after conditioning, for the whistle sound itself, the dog was salivating. The educational implications of this classical conditioning theory follows like 5 laws he has proposed. As Thorndike has proposed law of readiness, law of exercise and law of effect, Pavlov also has proposed 5 laws: law of causation, law of extinction, law of reinforcement, law of generalization and law of discrimination. We see one after the other. First, law of causation. So here what happens, the repetition of the controlled stimulus followed by the uncontrolled stimulus leads to the response. That is, bell associated with food, saliva was, the dog was able to salivate. So keep on, we are repeating. So it is the law of causation. We are able to cause the salivate. Then the next one is the law of extinction. So here what happens, if the controlled stimulus is not followed by the uncontrolled stimulus, the controlled response may gradually disappear. For the stroke of bell, the dog was salivating over a period of time. And after some time, if the food was not given to the dog at the stroke of bell, you cannot expect the dog to salivate. So whenever we are learning, we need to keep on we need to keep on recall whatever we have learned. We shouldn't stop with one time learning. If you stop with one time learning, there will not be any learning progress in us. So bell with no food, no saliva. Then law of reinforcement. Here, the food which has reinforcement effect strengthen the bond between the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned response. Because the bell was given along with the food, the food serves as a reinforcement and bell was a conditional stimulus and the dog was able to salivate. Then the law of generalization. Any conditional stimulus, same conditional response. For an example, as I told you already, he tried with a bell, he tried with a clock, he tried with the light or different kinds of bell. All that he has done, for everything, the dog was salivating. So any conditional stimulus, same conditional response the dog was giving. And law of discrimination. Here, the ability to respond differently to different stimuli. You could see here in the picture the decibel sound of the bell. For the high volume sound, the dog was salivating much. For the low volume sound, the dog was salivating less. So the dog was able to discriminate the decibel, the sound of the bell. And in general, we come across with this kind of conditioning. Usually our mind is conditioned. For an example, When we come across with lightning, automatically we try to close our ears, because having a assumption that the next soon after lightning we'll get thunder, and we would just wince, like we keep our eyes also like that. And another example I could give, for this unconditional stimulus food, the milk, the baby was actually responding, the baby was smiling at, okay. So mother is the one who is giving the milk. So when the baby sees the mother for first time, the baby will not have any response. But when the mother start giving the food for the baby starts smiling at the mother. So whenever the baby sees the mother, automatically the baby smiles. So our mind is conditioned artificially. So all our activities, whenever you come across with any activity, our mind is artificially being conditioned, and this conditioning is only called as learning according to Pavlov. According to Thorndike, learning is strengthening the bond between stimulus and response, and eliminating the wrong trials and sticking on to the correct trial is learning. But according to Pavlov, conditioning artificially, we can condition the mind, and that is what is called as learning. What are the educational implications of classical conditioning? Conditioning creates a sort of fear, love, and hatred towards a specific subject. For an example, mathematics, if you take, I'm not blaming all the mathematics teachers, I'm very sorry. Sometimes mathematics, the teachers may be very strict and they may give a lot of homework. So students' mind is conditioned. Students may dislike the subject. And for example, English, due to a lot of stories, the students may like the subject. So it is not a general law, it may differ person to person. So teachers' behavior and approach can bring in interest towards the subject of the students. So teachers can change the boring subject into an interesting subject by changing their methodology. And developing good habits and elimination of bad habits is also an educational implication of classical conditioning. And students come to the school with a lot of fear, different kinds of phobia they come across with. All these are the conditioning of the mind. So teachers are expected to uncondition the mind of the students by eliminating all these kind of fear from the students' mind. The next theory is about operant conditioning, which was proposed by a person called B.F. Skinner. He was a student of E.L. Thorndike, and he was an American. Operant conditioning is a type of associative learning process through which the strength of the behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. Thorndike has said trial and error is the only way of learning. Pavlov said artificially we can condition the mind of a person, and that is what is called as learning. But this B.F. Skinner, he says that learning is possible only with regard to the reinforcement. Reinforcement is some kind of motivation. And he created the principles of operant conditioning, which include positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, punishment, and extinction. And he has defined the learning as the process in which the consequences will follow a response which determine whether the behavior will be repeated or not. So behavior will likely to be repeated when it is given a sort of reinforcement, and behavior will become extinct when there is no reinforcement. That is the idea of B.F. Skinner. Let me explain the experiment of B.F. Skinner with regard to operant conditioning theory. He has taken a hungry rat and he has designed a puzzle box, and this is called as the Skinner's box. It has several features. First of all, you have to understand what are the features in the box. The rat had a lever, and the lever had an association with the food dispenser. Whenever the rat pressed the lever, rat was provided with the food pellet. And you do have the electric grid on the floor, which was passing the electrical shock. In order to indicate the rat that the electrical shock is going to be passed, there will be some lights over here. These are called as the signal light, and a speaker was also kept over there. Whenever the rat was hungry, the rat has just pressed the lever and the rat was provided with a food pellet. Then electrical shock was passed. In order to just avoid the electrical shock, the rat accidentally pressed the lever and the rat was provided with the food pellet, as well as the electrical shock was switched off. So the rat learnt the skill of pressing the lever to get the food once, that is positive, and in order to avoid this electrical shock also the rat was pressing the lever. So this is the learning happened to the rat. So Skinner's operant conditioning chamber was designed to teach the rat how to push the lever, and this behavior is not natural to the rat. So operant conditioning with positive and negative reinforcement were performed in order to teach the behavior. The positive reinforcement was the rat was awarded with a food pellet whenever the rat was pressing the lever. The negative reinforcement was rat was able to turn off the electrical shock produced by the floor by pressing the lever. So the positive reinforcement is initially the rat's behavior was random. It accidentally tripped on the lever and the food pellet was released. Then rat discovered that intentionally pressing the lever resulted in the reward as a sort of food pellet. The consequence of performing the behavior was desirable, ensuring that the rat would repeat the action again and again. And the negative reinforcement was an unpleasant current, electrical current ran through the floor in the rat's cage. Initially, accidental lever pushing turned off the electrical current. So the consequence of avoiding something painful or removal of unpleasant stimulus ensured that the rat continued to push the lever. So the positive reinforcement is equivalent to increasing the behavior but by administering the reward, that is giving the food pellet, and the negative reinforcement is increasing the behavior by removing an unpleasant or aversive stimulus when the behavior occurs. And punishment is decreasing the behavior by removing the positive stimulus. And extinction also happens by decreasing the behavior by not rewarding. When the rat was not given food again and again, the behavior became extinct. And continuous reinforcement, every time, whenever the rat does the correct behavior, it was given the food. And extinction of operant behavior occurs when you stop giving the rat the food pellet as a reward for pushing the pedal. What are the educational implications of operant conditioning theory? Students come up with a lot of fear and superstitious beliefs in them because of conditioning from the parent as well as from the society. And it is the role of a teacher to remove all the unwanted conditioning by deconditioning the mind of the students. And the teachers can use the language learning by associating the word with picture and meaning. You could see the smaller kids learning the picture and the meaning. That is called as conditioning. And this operant conditioning is used to develop the favorable attitude towards learning and teaching in the school. And it is helping the teacher to develop good habits among the students. And Montessori system of education is based on this Skinner's operant conditioning theory. So according to Thorndike, learning is possible by eliminating wrong trial and clinging on to the correct trial. And Pavlov said that artificially we can condition the mind of a person for learning. And Skinner said that learning is possible only with regard to the reinforcement, positive reinforcement as well as negative reinforcement. Both will be given award, and both are giving award, and that is the strength of the learning. And we have seen all these theories with different animals. How are you going to remember? Let me give you a memory technique. Thorndike used cat. Remember TC, transfer certificate, cat. Thorndike, cat. Pavlov used an animal called dog. How does the dog bark? Wow, wow, Pavlov. Remember like that. Then Skinner used rat. You could see Skinner very lean person. So same way the rat, if you could see the skin of the rat, it was little, very thin, flimsy. So you can relate Skinner with rat. Now we are going to have the difference between the classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning developed by Pavlov, operant conditioning Skinner. Classical conditioning reinforcement first, response second. That is food first, saliva next. Operant conditioning reinforcement after the response is done. After pressing the lever only, the rat was provided with the food. Classical conditioning emphasizes the stimulus. Operant conditioning emphasizes the response. In classical conditioning, responses are elicited. In operant conditioning, responses are emitted. A chain is from stimulus to response in classical conditioning, whereas in operant conditioning, a chain is from response to stimulus. In classical conditioning, conditional response and unconditional response are the same. For both, it was just salivating. But here, conditional response and as well as even the unconditional response, both are the same. The essence of learning is stimulus substitution. Here, the essence of learning is response modification. Respondent behavior is internal. Here, operant behavior is external. In classical conditioning, it is controlled by autonomous nervous system because of saliva, and here it is controlled by central nervous system. In this picture also you could come across with a good understanding and the difference between classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, in the dog you could see it can associate the involuntary response as a stimulus, that is the saliva. But here in rat it associates the voluntary behavior, or voluntarily rat was just pressing the pedal. See, in the next picture you could see it's time for food, so I should press the lever. But here for the dog says that there goes a bell, it is the time for food. Next, we are going to focus on the constructivist theory proposed by John Dewey. John Dewey was a philosophical founder of constructivism. Brunner as well as Piaget were also proposed this constructivism theory, but they were focusing on cognitive constructivism. Same way, Vygotsky was a social constructivist. Dewey's theory states that constructivism can build individual and social knowledge. The essence contained in constructivism theory is the meaning of a learning process. He said that if any individual would like to learn anything, he can construct one experience after the other experience and he can construct the knowledge. So students can build their knowledge to create and design something related to their needs. John Dewey's constructivism theory, according to him, he believed that learning should be engaging to the students. It should not be forcefully given to the students. They will learn better if they are interested. And he created a huge influence on our education system. He believed in educating the whole child physically, mentally, socially, and not just on the dispensation of the facts or information. These are the features of constructivism classroom. In a constructivist classroom, you could see the interaction between, in this picture you could see the interaction between the students, teacher, peer group and the content material. So knowledge will be shared between the teachers and the students. Both will be sharing the information. But in a normal traditional classroom, only teachers would be talking. But in a constructivist classroom, both students as well as teachers will be sharing the information. So both of them would take the authority of knowledge, and the teacher's role is just to be a guide or a facilitator. And the students can form the learning group, and which will consist of small number of heterogeneous students, and they share their information. So the constructivism theory, according to that, learners construct knowledge rather than just passively taking in information. As people of experience the world and reflect upon the experiences, they build their own representations and incorporate new information into the pre-existing knowledge. Whatever the people are having the knowledge, they keep learning every day. Day by day, they are getting a lot of experiences, and all these experiences are constructing their knowledge. And the role of teacher is, it will help the teacher has to help the students to build the knowledge and to control the existence of students during the learning process in the classroom. And teacher concentrates on students learning rather than the teacher's performance. An example, if an elementary school teacher, if she wanted to teach the measurement, she can just take a pencil and give it to the students to go and find out the different methodologies to measure this pencil, instead of taking a ruler or taking an inch tape and go to the class and teaching them. So rather than starting the problem by introducing the ruler, the teacher can allow the student to reflect and construct their own methods of measurement. So the essence of constructivist theory is learners must individually discover and transform complex information if they are to make their own. What are the benefits of constructivism? Children can enjoy and learn more when they are actively involved than passively listening. Education works the best when it concentrates on thinking and understanding rather than rote memorization. Constructivist learning is transferable. Students can create and organize their principles of learning and they can take to the other learning setups. Constructivism gives the students a sort of ownership because they learn on their own what they learn, and often students have a hand in designing the assessment as well. Engaging the creative instinct develop the students' ability to express the knowledge through a variety of ways. And students are more likely to retain all the information and transfer the new knowledge to their real world. And they can learn to question things and apply their natural curiosity to the world. Constructivism promotes the social and communication skill by creating an environment that emphasizes the collaboration and exchange of ideas through project method. This is the difference between traditional classroom and constructivist classroom. Traditional classroom, fixed curriculum. Constructivist classroom, the curriculum is flexible. Learning is based on repetition there, and here learning is interactive, building their own knowledge. Traditional classroom is teacher centered, while constructivist classroom is student centered. Here, teacher disseminate the information to the students, and students simply receive all the information. Whereas constructivist classroom, teachers have a dialogue with the students, helping the students to construct their knowledge on their own by active learning. Here, the teacher's role is directive, rooted to authority. Here, the teacher's role is interactive, rooted in negotiation. Students work primarily alone as a competitive thing. Here, students work in group. The key takeaway messages are learning is a relatively permanent change in the behavior which occurs as a resultant of activity, training, practice, and experience. According to Thorndike, learning is the formation of strengthening the bond of connection between stimulus and response. According to Skinner, the strength of behavior is modified by reinforcement or punishment. Pavlov promoted the type of learning in which the natural stimulus can become the conditioned stimulus by associated with unconditional stimulus. Let me raise two questions for you to reflect on. As a teacher, how will you help your students to construct their knowledge on their own? Plan your strategies for deconditioning the student's mind. These are some of the references for your future learning. Thank you for listening. Wish you all good luck.